My dear brothers and sisters, every single one of us at some point in our lives has experienced the pain of losing someone, not through death, but through distance. Someone who once mattered deeply, someone you trusted, loved, relied upon. And when they left, or when circumstances pulled them away, your heart asked a question that echoed in the silence: why? Why would Allah allow someone so close to be removed from my life? You see, we often ask Allah to bring people into our lives, good people, supportive people, loving people. But rarely do we stop to think that sometimes, out of His infinite mercy, Allah removes people too. Not to punish us, not to break us, but to protect us, to elevate us, and to draw us closer to Him. There are moments when Allah sees what we cannot see. He sees the future harm, the distraction from our purpose, the attachment that is slowly replacing our reliance on Him. And out of love, He intervenes, quietly, firmly, perfectly. And yes, it hurts, because the heart feels before the mind understands. But what if that pain was actually a doorway? What if the separation was not a loss, but a lesson? What if Allah was saying, I want better for you, even if you don't understand it yet? Today, let us reflect not with bitterness, but with faith. Let us learn to trust the wisdom of Allah when He removes certain people from our lives, knowing that He never takes away something unless He plans to replace it with something better or bring us closer to Himself. When Allah removes someone from your life, it is never random, never careless, and never without wisdom, even if at that moment it feels confusing, unfair, or deeply painful. As human beings, we see only what is in front of us. We see the laughter, the memories, the emotional attachment, the comfort of familiarity. But Allah sees far beyond that single chapter. He sees the entire story of your life, from the beginning to the very end. And He knows exactly which relationships will nurture your soul and which ones, over time, will quietly harm it. One of the greatest misunderstandings we have is assuming that everything we love is good for us. Attachment can blind the heart. Sometimes we become so emotionally invested in a person that we overlook how that relationship is affecting our iman, our character, our peace, and even our relationship with Allah. You may not notice it immediately. It often starts subtly missing salah, because conversations run long, compromising values to maintain harmony, feeling distant from Allah while feeling close to people. And Allah, out of mercy, does not always wait for the damage to become permanent. Allah's wisdom is not limited to what makes us happy in the moment. His wisdom is rooted in what will save us in the long run. There are people who come into our lives for a season, not a lifetime. They serve a purpose to teach us patience, to teach us boundaries, to teach us self-worth, or even to teach us what we should never settle for again. Once that lesson is complete, Allah may remove them, because keeping them longer would only delay your growth. Sometimes Allah removes people because they are holding you back from becoming the person you are meant to be. You may not realize it while they are present. You might even defend them. You might say, but they understand me, or they've been there for me, or I can't imagine my life without them. Yet Allah knows that your potential is greater than your current environment. And growth often requires discomfort. Just as a seed must break open to grow into a tree, sometimes relationships must break apart for you to rise. There are also moments when Allah removes people as a form of protection. Not every danger comes loudly. Some dangers come wrapped in kindness, familiarity, and emotional closeness. Allah knows the intentions people hide, the changes they will undergo, and the paths they will eventually choose. He may be saving you from future betrayal, regret, or heartbreak. That would have shattered you more deeply had it come later. So He intervenes early, not because you deserve pain, but because you deserve protection. And then there are times when Allah removes people to teach us a profound lesson about reliance. We sometimes lean so heavily on people that we forget who truly sustains us. We expect emotional fulfillment, stability, validation, and security from creation when all of it ultimately belongs to the Creator. When Allah removes a person you relied on deeply, it forces you to turn inward and upward. It teaches you that hearts change, people leave, circumstances shift, but Allah remains constant. He does not leave. He does not forget. He does not abandon. This is why, after loss, many people say, I found Allah again, or I became closer to Allah than I ever was before. The pain redirected them. The emptiness made space for dua. The loneliness taught them tahajjud. The heartbreak softened their hearts in sujud. What felt like a loss was actually a return to sincerity, humility, and dependence on Allah alone. It is also important to understand that Allah, as wisdom, does not always come with immediate clarity. Sometimes you won't understand why someone had to leave until years later. You might look back and realize that had they stayed, you would not be where you are today emotionally, spiritually, or even physically. You will see how certain doors only opened because other doors were closed. At that moment, your heart will finally whisper, now I understand. Until that clarity comes, Allah asks us for trust. Trust is not pretending the pain does still exist. Trust is acknowledging the pain while believing that Allah knows what you do not. Trust is saying, Ya Allah, this hurts, but I believe you chose this for a reason. That level of faith is not easy. It is built through patience, reflection, and constant remembrance that Allah is Al-Hakim, the most wise. Remember this, Allah never removes someone to leave you empty. He removes to replace. Sometimes He replaces people with peace, sometimes with strength, sometimes with wisdom, and sometimes He replaces them with Himself. And there is no replacement greater than that. So if someone has been removed from your life and your heart still aches, do not rush the healing. Do not blame yourself endlessly. Do not question your worth. Instead, ask Allah what He wants you to learn. Ask Him what He is protecting you from. Ask Him how this moment can bring you closer to Him. Because when Allah is the one who writes your story, even the painful chapters are filled with mercy, whether you see it now or later. When Allah removes certain people from your life, one of the deepest wisdoms behind it is that He is calling you back to a place of true reliance and inner strength. Human beings naturally seek comfort in companionship. They lean on others emotionally, mentally, and sometimes spiritually. There is nothing wrong with loving people, valuing them, or appreciating their presence. But the heart was never created to depend completely on anyone other than Allah. When that balance shifts, when reliance on people quietly replaces reliance on Allah, the heart begins to weaken without us even realizing it. Often Allah allows a relationship to grow strong so that we can see what happens when it becomes central to our sense of security. You might find that your mood depends on them. Your peace depends on their words. Your confidence rises and falls based on how they treat you. Slowly, your happiness becomes conditional. And Allah, in His mercy, does not allow His servants to remain enslaved to anything other than Him. So He removes what you cling to not to punish you, but to free you. The pain that follows is not just emotional, it is spiritual. The heart feels exposed, empty, and vulnerable. But that emptiness is not meant to destroy you. It is meant to redirect you. When there is no one left to lean on, you finally lean on Allah. When there is no one left to confide in at midnight, you raise your hands in dua. When no human words can soothe you, you turn to the Quran. This is how reliance is rebuilt, not in comfort, but in hardship. At the same time, Allah removes people to help you discover your own strength. Many people do not realize how capable they are until they are forced to stand alone. While others were present, you may have relied on them to make decisions, to validate your feelings, to give you direction. Their absence pushes you to think, reflect, and act for yourself. You begin to hear your own voice again. You begin to understand your values more clearly. You become emotionally and spiritually stronger, not because life became easier, but because you survived what you thought you could. There is a quiet transformation that happens during these moments. You learn patience, not the passive kind, but the kind that keeps you moving forward while trusting Allah. You learn gratitude for the people who remain. You learn discernment, recognizing which relationships bring you closer to Allah and which pull you away. Most importantly, you learn that your worth is not tied to who stays or who leaves. Your worth was given to you by Allah long before anyone entered your life. Another profound wisdom behind Allah removing people is growth of Iman through difficulty. Ease rarely transforms the heart. Comfort rarely leads to deep reflection, but loss shakes the soul. It forces you to question, to reflect, and to turn inward. When someone leaves your life, you begin to ask bigger questions. Who am I without them? What truly matters? Where am I going? These questions, though painful, refine the heart. They strip away distractions and bring clarity. Many people become more sincere in their worship after loss. Their prayers become more heartfelt. Their tears in sujood become more honest. Their remembrance of Allah becomes less habitual and more desperate in the most beautiful way. That desperation is not weakness. It is humility. It is recognizing that you are in need of Allah at every moment. And Allah loves when His servants turn to Him with broken hearts, because those hearts are the softest and most receptive. With time, you begin to see that what left your life made space for something better. Maybe not another person right away, but peace, emotional maturity, self-respect, a clearer connection with Allah. You start to notice how your thoughts are calmer, how your heart is less anxious, how your decisions are more aligned with your values. This is growth that could not have happened if the old attachments had remained. And perhaps the most comforting truth is this: Allah does not take without giving. He may delay the replacement to teach you patience. He may give in a form you did not expect, but He never leaves His servant empty-handed. Sometimes the gift is inner peace. Sometimes it is wisdom. Sometimes it is a deeper relationship with Him. And sometimes after you have grown, healed, and realigned your heart, He brings into your life people who are healthier, more sincere, and more aligned with your journey. So if Allah has removed someone from your life, and you are struggling to understand why, remember this: you're not being abandoned, you're being guided, you're being strengthened, you're being protected in ways you cannot yet see. Trust the process, even when it feels painful, because Allah's plan is not shaped by your present emotions, but by your eternal well-being. When Allah removes someone from your life, one of the most powerful outcomes, though often the hardest to accept, is the growth of Iman that comes through difficult goodbyes. Growth in faith rarely happens when everything is comfortable, predictable, and emotionally satisfying. More often, it happens when the heart is shaken, when certainty is challenged, and when the believer is forced to confront their vulnerability. A painful separation has a way of stripping the heart bare, removing distractions, and placing a person face to face with their own dependence on Allah. Goodbyes hurt because they expose attachment. They reveal how deeply we invested emotionally, how much space someone occupied in our thoughts, routines, and sense of stability. And it is precisely this exposure that becomes a turning point for Iman. When someone leaves and the heart feels fractured, you suddenly realize how fragile human connections are. People change, feelings shift, circumstances intervene. What once felt permanent disappears. And in that realization, the heart begins to search for something unchanging. This is where Iman either weakens or deepens. Some hearts turn bitter, questioning Allah's wisdom, drowning in resentment. But hearts that choose faith begin to turn upward. They begin to remember that Allah never promised permanence in people. He promised tests. He promised trials. And He promised that with every hardship comes an opportunity to draw closer to Him. The goodbye becomes a mirror, reflecting how much the heart relied on creation instead of the Creator. And that awareness itself is a gift. Difficult goodbyes force sincerity in worship. Before the loss, prayer may have been routine, recited with the tongue, while the heart was distracted. After the loss, prayer becomes a refuge. The words of dua suddenly carry weight. Tears come without effort. Sajda lasts longer, because standing back up feels too heavy. In those moments, worship is no longer about habit, it becomes survival. And that raw, desperate turning to Allah is one of the purest forms of Iman. There is a unique closeness to Allah that only broken hearts experience. When the heart is full, it often forgets. When the heart breaks, it remembers. It remembers that Allah is As-Sami, the one who hears even the silent cries. It remembers that Allah is Al-Jabbar, the one who mends what is shattered. It remembers that Allah is Al-Latif, gentle in ways the mind cannot comprehend. This remembrance is not theoretical, it is lived, felt, and deeply personal. Through these goodbyes, a believer also learns acceptance of divine decree. Acceptance does not mean the absence of pain. It means choosing not to rebel against Allah's wisdom despite the pain. It means saying, Ya Allah, I do not understand, but I trust you. That statement, when it comes from a wounded heart, carries immense weight. It transforms suffering into worship. It turns patience into elevation. Another way Iman grows is through self-reflection. When someone leaves your life, you are left alone with your thoughts. There is silence where there used to be noise. And in that silence, you begin to reflect on your own actions, intentions, and priorities. You begin to ask yourself whether you placed people above principles, emotions above values, or comfort above obedience. This reflection, though uncomfortable, refines the soul. It pushes a believer towards self-improvement, repentance, and a desire to align more closely with what pleases Allah. Loss also teaches humility. No matter how strong a bond feels, no matter how sincere the promise is, Allah reminds us that nothing in this dunya is fully within our control. That realization humbles the heart. It removes arrogance. It softens judgment toward others. A person who has experienced painful goodbyes often becomes more compassionate, more understanding, and more gentle qualities beloved to Allah. Over time, Iman matures through perspective. What once felt like devastation slowly reveals hidden mercy. You begin to notice that your heart is calmer without constant emotional turbulence. You find that your focus has shifted toward what truly matters. You may realize that certain sins lost their appeal, that certain habits improved, that your connection with the Quran deepened. None of this happened despite the loss it happened because of it. And then there is hope. Not the shallow hope that everything will go back to how it was, but a deeper hope rooted in trust in Allah. S-plan. You begin to believe that Allah is capable of replacing what was lost with something better, whether in this life or the next. That belief strengthens Iman because it anchors the heart in the hereafter, not just the present moment. The most beautiful transformation is when a believer reaches a point where they can say sincerely, Alhamdulillah for what stayed and Alhamdulillah for what left. That statement does not come easily. It is earned through tears, patience, prayer, and time. But when it finally settles in the heart, it marks a level of faith that is no longer fragile. It is resilient. It has been tested and refined. Difficult goodbyes do not mean Allah is distant. Often they mean He's closer than ever. He is shaping a heart that will rely on Him, trust Him, and return to Him no matter what is lost along the way. And that kind of Iman born from pain, strengthened by patience and anchored in trust, is a treasure far greater than any relationship this world can offer. When Allah removes certain people from your life, one of the deepest lessons He teaches through that experience is the difference between attachment and true reliance. As human beings, we are created with hearts that love, connect, and bond. Attachment itself is not sinful. Islam does not teach us to be cold, distant, or emotionless. The Prophet ﷺ loved deeply his family, his companions, his ummah. But there is a fine, delicate line between loving someone for the sake of Allah and becoming so attached that the heart begins to depend on them in a way that only Allah deserves. Attachment becomes dangerous when it starts to control the heart. When a person's presence determines your peace, when their approval defines your worth, when their absence leaves you spiritually empty rather than just emotionally sad. At that point, the heart is no longer anchored. It is drifting. And Allah, in His mercy, does not allow a believing heart to remain attached to something that can break it completely. Many people don't realize how attached they are until Allah removes the object of that attachment. While the person is present, the imbalance feels normal. You might say, this is just love, or this is just closeness. But when they leave and your world feels like it has collapsed, when your faith feels shaken, when your sense of self feels lost, that is when the truth becomes clear. The heart had placed weight where it was never meant to rest. Reliance, on the other hand, is entirely different. Reliance means you love people, benefit from them, appreciate them, but your heart knows that they are means, not sources. The source is Allah. People can support you, but they cannot sustain you. They can comfort you, but they cannot heal you completely. They can walk beside you, but they cannot carry your soul. Only Allah can do that. When Allah removes someone you were deeply attached to, it often feels like punishment. But in reality, it is realignment. Allah is gently and sometimes firmly pulling your heart back to its rightful place. He is reminding you, this heart was created for me, not to the exclusion of others, but above all others. Because when the heart relies on Allah first, it can love people without being destroyed by them. This removal teaches you a painful but liberating truth. People are temporary, but Allah is constant. Human beings are limited. They get tired. They change. They disappoint. They leave sometimes intentionally, sometimes without choice. Allah does none of that. He does not grow distant. He does not forget you. He does not abandon you in your weakest moments. When everyone else is gone, Allah is still there, closer than your jugular vein. At first, the heart resists this lesson. It longs for what it lost. It replays memories. It asks what if and if only. This resistance is human, but as time passes, something begins to shift. You start turning to Allah not just because you have no one else, but because you begin to realize that He is enough. You talk to Him about things you once shared with people. You seek comfort from Him instead of messages, validation, or reassurance from others. Slowly, reliance is rebuilt. This is not an easy transition. It often comes with loneliness. But that loneliness has a purpose. It creates space. Space where the heart can breathe again without being dependent. Space where you rediscover your identity beyond who you were attached to. Space where your relationship with Allah becomes personal, intimate, and sincere, not just inherited or habitual. One of the most beautiful outcomes of this lesson is emotional balance. When reliance is on Allah, relationships become healthier. You no longer cling. You no longer fear abandonment excessively. You no longer compromise your values just to keep someone close. You love, but you do not lose yourself. You care, but you do not collapse if things change. This emotional maturity is a gift that only comes after attachment has been challenged. Allah removes people to protect the heart from being shattered by false security. Because relying on people gives the illusion of safety, but it is fragile. Relying on Allah gives true stability because He controls hearts, circumstances, and outcomes. When your reliance is on Him, even loss does not destroy you. It hurts. Yes, but it does not hollow you out. Over time, you may look back and realize that the removal saved you. It saved you from emotional dependence. It saved you from spiritual neglect. It saved you from building your life around someone who was never meant to be your foundation. And you will understand that Allah did not take them away to leave you with nothing. He took them away to give you Himself. This lesson reshapes the heart forever. Once you learn the difference between attachment and reliance, you never love the same way again. You love more purely, you love more consciously, and most importantly, you love Allah above all else. And when Allah is at the center of your heart, everything else falls into its proper place. That is why, even though the removal was painful, it was necessary, because Allah wanted your heart whole, not divided, anchored, not dependent, reliant, not attached. And in that realignment, there is a peace that no human being could ever provide. When Allah removes certain people from your life, one of the most comforting truths, though often the hardest to believe in the moment, is that He is teaching you to trust His plan even when it hurts. Trust is easy when life flows the way we want it to. Trust is easy when people stay, doors remain open, and the heart feels secure. But real trust, the kind that elevates a believer, is formed when the heart is tested, when expectations are shattered, and when the path ahead feels unclear. Pain has a way of shaking certainty. When someone leaves your life, Especially unexpectedly, the heart searches for answers. You replay conversations, analyze mistakes, and question every decision. And quietly, the soul asks Allah, why would you allow this? That question is not a sign of weak faith. It is a sign of a human heart seeking meaning. What matters is what you do with that question. Do you let it turn into resentment, or do you let it become a bridge to deeper trust? Trusting Allah does not mean suppressing pain. Islam does not ask you to pretend that loss does not hurt. Even the prophets felt grief. Even the most righteous cried, mourned, and struggled. Trust means allowing yourself to feel the pain while believing that Allah's wisdom is greater than your understanding. It means saying, Ya Allah, I am hurting, but I know you are not wrong. That statement, when spoken from a wounded heart, is an act of worship. One of the hardest aspects of trust is accepting that Allah's plan may unfold differently from your expectations. You may have imagined a future with certain people in it. You may have built dreams around their presence. When Allah removes them, it feels like the future itself has been taken away. But what you imagined was based on limited knowledge. Allah's plan is based on complete knowledge of you, of us, and of what lies ahead. Allah knows which relationships would have led you away from Him, even subtly. He knows which ones would have drained your energy, weakened your faith, or delayed your growth. He knows which attachments would have turned into sources of pain later on, so He intervenes early, even if the intervention hurts now. Trusting His plan means believing that what He saved you from is greater than what He took away. Trust also means understanding the timing is part of mercy. You may not see the wisdom today, or even this year. The heart often demands immediate clarity, but Allah teaches patience by delaying understanding. Years later, you might look back and realize that had that person stayed, you would not have become who you are now. You might see how certain doors only opened because others were closed. That delayed clarity is not neglected, it's part of the journey. There is also a quiet strength that grows when you trust Allah through pain. You become less reactive, less desperate, less fearful of change. You begin to understand that Allah has carried you through every loss before this one. And He will carry you through this as well. That realization builds resilience. It reminds you that your survival does not depend on people staying, but on Allah sustaining you. Trusting Allah's plan reshapes how you view loss. Loss no longer feels like the end, it feels like redirection. It teaches you that Allah may remove what you love to give you what you need. And what you need is not always what you want in the moment. Sometimes, what you need is solitude to heal. Sometimes you need distance to gain clarity. Sometimes you need emptiness so that your heart can be refilled with something better. This trust also softens the heart. Instead of becoming bitter, you become reflective. Instead of blaming, you grow. Instead of closing yourself off, you open your hands to Allah. You learn to say, if this was written for me, it would have stayed. And if it left, then Allah has written something else for me. That belief brings a peace that logic alone cannot provide. Perhaps the most beautiful outcome of trusting Allah in pain is contentment. Contentment does not mean life becomes perfect. It means the heart becomes steady. You stop fighting reality and start flowing with divine decree. You stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start asking, what does Allah want to teach me through this? That shift changes everything. In time, you may find yourself grateful not necessarily for the pain, but for what it produced. For the strength you did, to know you had. For the closeness to Allah you did, to know you were missing. For the clarity that only came after letting go. And you will realize that Allah did not remove people from your life to break you. He removed them to build you. Trusting Allah. His plan is not about understanding every detail. It is about believing that the one who plans is more merciful to you than you are to yourself. And when that belief settles in the heart, even the deepest pain becomes bearable because it is carried with faith.